Good evening and welcome to the final event of this year's Jewish Literary Festival Week. My name is Danielle Breitman. I'm the Director of Engagement Programming for the Calgary JCC. And this year's festival has been lovingly curated by Shula Banchik, the Manager of Arts and Culture, and by Danielle Halprin, our Festival Chair. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge and honor the traditional territories of the Blackfoot and the Treaty 7 people, including the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kini, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations. Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Thank you for the privilege of working, learning, and living on this land. We have the honor of being joined by actress and writer Kres Mersky. Kres has had a long career in television, theater, and film, guest starring in numerous episodic television shows, the Mark Taper Forum, the Amundsen Theater, and other theatrical venues. And tonight we're here to discuss the one-woman play that she created, The Life and Times of A. Einstein. It is a hilarious and touching portrait of Albert Einstein, as well as a humanizing look into the Nobel Laureate's life, as seen through the people around him. Welcome, Kres.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And we're so happy that you could make it on Zoom from the comfort of your home.
Hopping on.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the play and sort of what inspired you and what drew you to Albert Einstein.
Oh, sure. Well, I think like a lot of people, just very fascinated by Albert Einstein and his life. And not that I have any kind of background in physics at all, but I think I was just always fascinated with his personage and the idea that he was so brilliant and that he had the kind of mental fortitude to completely change our understanding of the laws of time and nature. And that to me was just fascinating, that there was someone, and there's obviously many great geniuses throughout science, and it also just his own persona, which is so mesmerizing and charismatic. I mean, he's such an iconic character. I mean, his image alone is just his physical appearance is so, captivating, that I began to read about him and just thought, gosh, as a writer, it would be wonderful to try to do something about him theatrically. So that was sort of the impetus. I was looking for something to write, and I thought, gosh, it would be amazing to try to do something theatrically about him. And in reading about him, I would always come across the secretary, the woman who was, she came to work for the Einstein family as a secretary to Einstein when she was in her late 20s. She was a German Jewish young woman from Berlin, and was hired and stayed with him for the rest of her life. She never married. She lived in the home and came with the family when they fled Germany and came to America and settled in Princeton, New Jersey. And that just seemed incredibly interesting to me. This woman who's, certainly always mentioned in anything you read about, but you never really become acquainted with her because it's always about Einstein. So I thought it would be kind of fascinating to write about Einstein through the eyes of his secretary. So that's kind of the premise of the piece.
Amazing. So the characters of Ellen and of Anna, these are based on historical people.
Yes, absolutely. There, the secretary, her name, I've changed the name. The real woman her name was Helen Dukas, and she was as the more research I did, the more I was able to find out about her. And so I stayed as close to fact as possible, but obviously I had to do a little bit of kind of artistic, license in creating her kind of inner life and her story. But I did try to stick as much to all the facts that I could get about her, and then kind of created these situations where she finds herself in, which the play, depicts. So
did you discover anything very surprising or like wildly interesting during the course of your research for the performance that you maybe hadn't already been aware of?
well, about Einstein, or about, well, I certainly, in the beginning, I didn't know any more about Einstein than probably the average person on the street, except he was this scientific genius. And so I certainly was able to become acquainted in a very layman's way about the theory of relativity, just to realize, I think, surprising that he was an incredible humanitarian. I wasn't aware of that. Incredibly outspoken about many social issues in America, very bold and brave in his progressive views of things, very committed to the state of Israel, also critical of its it as well, was not blind to the problems as well. I think personally that he wasn't easy to, which I suppose isn't surprising. He wasn't easy on a personal level to be involved with. He was married twice. His first wife, they divorced. The second wife, she died about 8 years after they came to this country. And just the difficulty. I mean, he was so committed to his work, and he was also, which kind of people know, I don't really explore heavily in the show, but it's sort of known now, he was a bit of a philanderer. So that is not something people necessarily associate with Einstein, their image of Einstein, but that has certainly come out more and more in the public record, that he liked the ladies, I suppose you could put it, and that was something that was surprising, although that material was not as available as it is now, because the secretary who managed his estate till her own death in the 80s, I believe she died, the actual secretary, she controlled everything that went out about Einstein. So she really managed the public image. And so that material she held very close. And it was only after she died that letters were made available that reveal a lot about that aspect of him. So that was surprising to me.
Was it a challenge to address the scientific terminology in the play, bringing it down to layman's terms, or do you have a strong science background?
I have no science background, none whatsoever. Well, other than in school, no, my background is theater, theater. So no, no, I didn't have any background in it. And it was challenging. I mean, very challenging. So I read as much as I could. I spoke to some physicists, and the show is not really meant to be a show about the theory of relativity or quantum physics. It's more a personal look into Einstein's life, and to actually play with his theories in a kind of comical way in that the secretary doesn't understand it, just like most people wouldn't understand it. And it's, so I've used it, I've tried to play with it in a kind of theatrical, amusing way, in the way how a layman would respond if they were presented with this material, with this science stuff, and not understand any of it. So yeah, it
Well,
was challenging.
it was very well done.
Thank you.
As well was the German accent that you
Oh,
adopted.
thank
Is that,
you.
are accents something that come naturally to you, or did it take quite a bit of practice?
Well, it's a lot. Accents are a lot of work. Some accents are easier to do than others, and uh, I enjoy doing them. As an actor, I really like the challenge of an accent, and really like studying them. Um, so, but it's hard. It's hard work if you really want to be authentic. It's a lot of practice, just a lot of practice, and there's a lot of ways. I mean, there's some wonderful tapes. There's series of tapes that actors, that are designed for actors to work on accents, and watch movies, or anything you can do to kind of hear whatever accent you're working on. You talk to people, I do have a friend who's German, from Germany, so I was able to kind of, how do you pronounce that word exactly? And, am I saying it right? And then there's regional accents like there are in every country. And so that was a challenge too. I wanted to try to make it a Berlin accent, which is different than other areas of Germany. So yeah, but it was fun. I really like that. I do enjoy the challenge of learning a new accent.
So what do you do? Like, do you have a process for getting in character for a role? Because you've played some pretty different roles over the
Yeah,
years.
I have. Well, exactly. And it's a good question. And, every actor approaches the roles, in many different ways. For this, I tried to study the times as much as possible, the era. It's sort of the 1930s to the middle 1950s. So I definitely, studied Germany, what was going on in Germany, to learn the history of it, to learn, historically what was happening in the country. We all know it generally how awful it was and what happened during that period, and what, the brutality of it all. But I read a great deal about that. I read a great deal about that, and that helped prepare me. And then, in terms of creating that particular character, I just took what material I could find out about her. There's photographs of her, and to try to get some idea of, what she looked like, what she stood, how she stood. And then I have had a friend who was a German woman who was elderly at the time, and I sort of patterned some of my mannerisms after her. And, and then just, I think for actors, it's really your imagination, just, and then imagining yourself in that situation, and using whatever in your own life that might parallel it in some way to make it feel authentic and portray it. But, when you're, for this and for a lot of roles, there's a lot of research you have to do, just like, really studying the period. He was a very famous person, Einstein. So there's fortunately a great deal of material out there, but there's a lot of research, that goes into creating a role. And there was for this a great deal, but I really enjoyed it. It was a labor of love.
Absolutely. So lots of research, studying German. Uh, Can you take us through some of the other processes of the development of this piece?
Yeah, well, I belong to a theater group here in Los Angeles, and it's a it the group produces plays, for the public, puts plays on, and they also have workshops, a writer's workshop, an acting workshop, and so part of my process was, in the writer's workshop, bringing the material in, getting critiques from fellow writers. Uh, Also, I worked with a wonderful director initially who really helped me shape the material. And I workshopped it uh, at different venues. And, it was a developmental process, bringing it in uh, to the acting workshop that I belong to, the writing workshop, getting feedback and taking, the many, many wonderful comments and notes, so to speak, and just continuing to develop it. And it's always good, and then I had some what you would call workshop productions where it's more invitational and you're not quite inviting the critics in to see it yet. So you can just kind of get it on its feet and develop it. So yeah.
And knowing, with all of this new information that's been released about Einstein, his philandering ways, is
Yes.
there anything that you would change about the play?
Well, it's a good question. And I've thought about that. Like, do I want to really bring any of that into the play? It's kind of there a little bit. It's hinted at, I think, because I think when you see the the show, you can wonder, is she in love with Einstein? Were they ever involved? And that is a bit of a question that it has not been answered. Were they ever involved is something other people out in the public sphere have wondered about, and there isn't a definitive answer for it. I'm not sure. I think the piece, I'm not sure I would. Uh, I think there was a play written that was done in Connecticut, and Richard Dreyfuss, the actor Richard Dreyfuss, played Einstein, and the play sort of dealt with that. And I thought, well, fine, let them, they handled that. I'm not sure I'd wanted. I don't know. I don't think so. What I have incorporated more is the Berlin in that era, delving a bit more into the Germany that he had to flee from at that time. I'm looking at more material about that because I think it parallels so much of what's going on today in our world, the sort of strain of authoritarianism that's around. And so that I may incorporate some more into the piece.
It's so interesting that you bring up, were they in love? Did they have something? Because to me, this story was just as much about Ellen and her quest for independence and an extreme reverence, bordering on what seemed like quite the crush for
Yeah.
Einstein. Was this an intentional theme?
Well, I think so. I think, and you put it so well. I think the real woman in reading had a complete reverence for the man and a complete sense of devotion and sense of responsibility to help, maintain an environment that he could work in. And so, and that to me is very moving. And from what I've read, it would not appear that an ongoing affair occurred. And that seems to be the consensus, that perhaps initially there was something or not. You know, you could read different things, but I think without question, she was completely committed to her role as kind of secretary / watchdog. And I mean, that to me is fascinating, you know, and apparently she was quite a social character. She wasn't some recluse. She had friends. She had a sense of humor, but this was her job, her 24/7 job, and that's really interesting to me. And you know, she could be very stern if she had to deal with the press. She was you know, a tough customer, and she was the one who did it. She's the one who made, you know, reporters were knocking on the door, and she would be the one to handle, you know, handle everything. And I find that fascinating. I find it fascinating, that choice. And you know, she was a woman from that era where, you know, there wasn't many it's a kind of a fascinating story. I'll just quickly tell you, I found it fascinating anyway. I was wondering why would she be able to speak English? You know, obviously she has to be able to speak English, because how will I do this character for an English speaking audience? So I just thought maybe she worked for a publisher who translated things in Germany into English. So yeah, there I go. That'll be why she can speak English. And she probably learned it in school. So in reading more about her, and this is after the play was pretty well written, I came across some new material. I think it could have been in Walter Isaacson's book, Einstein, which was out about 10 years ago and was, you know, enormously successful. And it said she actually did, that was what she did. She worked for a publisher in Berlin. And I went, oh my God, that's amazing. I was like, wow, am I channeling her or something? And that kind of gave me chills. Like, it didn't say she worked for a publisher that was translating things into English, but she was like a secretary at a publishing company. So, you know, I think it was a great opportunity too. I mean, this job was offered her, and, you know, that would be probably very exciting for a young woman. So.
Absolutely. You know, the play deals with a lot of different subjects and some humor and some strong emotional drawing towards the end, and I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
But is the end of it? Is this fact? Was she with him right
Yeah.
through?
Well, that's a good question. Not entirely. That is a bit of my artistic license, if you will. She was certainly with him almost to the end. You know, he died in 1955. He had a heart condition that even at the time, there was a possibility, but it was quite risky that surgery could have helped him, but it wasn't assured. So he was in the hospital for a few days, and she was there the entire time. Was she with him at the moment of his death? I don't believe so. I don't believe so. So that was, you know, artistic license. Yeah, there. You know, I thought that's dramatic, and I think emotionally makes sense, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of played into that theme of reverence that was throughout, you know, talking about his bulging muscles and his
Yes.
glowing hair. The imagery was quite um quite realistic. You know, you did an amazing job at really
Thank you.
drawing in the watcher
Oh,
and
thank
really
thank you.
making us feel like we're right there, and we're listening to the secretary tell the story and of why he's late for this, you know, reporter quorum on his birthday. And yeah, it's very fascinating.
Thank
There's
you.
a lot of details in the film, you know, about Germany, about the bomb, about that time. Have you had to deal with any anti-Semitism or any kind of backlash because of that subject matter from critics or audiences?
I haven't. I haven't, I think not at all, and I'm happy to say, I mean, maybe there's some places that I could go and do it where that could happen. That's probably possible, but no, I haven't. I think people are seem to be, I'm happily, taken with the character and find it uh, a really kind of unusual and wonderful way to get to know Einstein, and through the eyes of this woman and from her perspective. Um, he's, of course, certainly in his life, he experienced he experienced it a great deal, and in Germany, as things got very bad there, it became very dangerous for him. And even he wasn't even really 100% welcomed in the United States, because he was not only Jewish, but he was a German. He was from Germany. And so there was a great deal of anti-Semitism in America then, and unfortunately it still exists. And there was a great deal of anti-German sentiment too. So, but in terms of the play itself, no, I haven't, and I hope it gives you a picture. It's not meant to be a total story about the anti-Semitism that drove him out of Europe, but I hope it is. I certainly want to touch on that, because that's, definitely his story too.
Yeah, it definitely brings in that historical piece of it, which was quite accurate for the
Yeah,
time. What
yeah.
was your favorite part
Oh
about
gosh.
the creation of this?
Oh golly. What is the favorite part? Well, I always like doing it and people liking it. That's kind of my favorite part, you know. But I think there's a lot of things I've enjoyed. I do, as I said, I really like working on accents. So it was fun to work on it, and to get, feel like I was doing a credible job, and that people I even had two German people who came to see it, and they were sort of got into an argument, because one said, no, she has to be German. She can't, that is a German accent. And the other one said, no, I think she's American, but she's, doing it. So that was very rewarding. Yeah, I really do. And I very much, the accent, I really enjoy accents. I've done other parts where I've, had to do accents, and I have fun with that. And I like the research too. I really do. I think if you're passionate about a subject matter, it's really fun to research it. That never got like, oh God, I've got to, read this book, like in school, like you've got to read something, you know, uh, no, I mean, it really becomes fascinating. And I think that's just if you're personally passionate about something, then research is kind of fun then. And I met some
Absolutely.
really interesting people. I got to talk to some really, some brilliant scientists. I live close to kind of a world famous institution, Caltech, which is in Pasadena here in California. And Einstein lectured there several times in the 1930s. And it's had some of the most famous physicists, scientists come out of there. And I had the opportunity to talk with several of them about the theory of relativity and physics, and I still don't understand it. But those were fun. I mean, the research, yeah. If I'm interested in something, there's other plays I've written, other pieces I've worked on that have required a lot of research, and I really enjoy that. Yeah. It's fun. It's like an education.
So on the flip side, do you have a least favorite part of the process?
Yeah, well, I think the least favorite part of it for all actors is just sort of the tedium of learning your lines. It's just basically a kind of humdrum job, to learn your lines, to know them, to know them as perfectly as you can, and to then get on stage and not forget them. That I don't think any actor would say, oh, I love learning lines. I would, if you talk to any actor, they'd probably say, no, that's not so much fun. That's like that's the tedium. That's a tedious part, because, and especially in a one-person piece, you really have to know your lines.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're the only one there.
I don't have another actor
cover.
to sort of like feed me some lines if I forget.
And is your husband, and I believe you have a son also, are they involved in?
Well, my husband actually directed this, so it's wonderful. He's had a few professions. He was in photography for many years, and he's always had his hand in theater, directing theater, and so we worked together on this, which was really fun and wonderful. Yeah. And my son, I do have an adult son, and he's a film editor here in Los Angeles, and he does a lot of commercials and documentaries. So yeah, so we're all sort of in that realm.
Show business just runs
Show
in
biz.
the family.
Yeah.
So I really have one last question, and that's, are you working on anything now?
Well, I am, I'm always working on this, and, sadly, the pandemic, for so many performers, really, 2 years of almost, engagements I had were canceled, and they're kind of coming back in a patchy sort of way. They're returning. But I am writing a new piece, which is not historical in any way. It's sort of, it's kind of a solo piece, but there's another character in it. And I have another play that I've begun that I will get to after I finish this other thing, So I'm working, yeah, writing stuff. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, maybe I have more questions.
Okay, sure.
Did you find that the pandemic was good for that creative process to begin new projects, or did it feel sort of like a chore because you just didn't have anything else to do?
Yeah. It was both, honestly. Some of it, I've written, I did a number of little short films that you can see on YouTube that are kind of funny and surreal and nutty. And so, it was a real mix of things. I think probably for all of us, but I think for creative folks, it's been a mix. And some people found it a very productive time. I found it to be both. I out of necessity, just pushed myself to do some more writing that I was kind of putting off because I had had more engagements with this piece, the show, the Einstein secretary piece. So, I mean, that was a positive, to like, okay, well, now I can get to writing those pieces that I was, oh, someday I'll get to them. So, but it's, I think for all of us been very challenging. And I think for people who, life is so much live performing, it was very hard to have that, um, taken away, not possible. And so it was both things, I'm, yeah, it was both good and then really not good, I don't think, and that's been my experience talking to, other colleagues and friends, it's like so hard not to be able to perform live. And as it is coming back, but it's challenging, not people were coming, as we're talking, people were coming back for certain things and other things not so much, so it's still kind of weird.
Well, and it's interesting because if you take a look back at, the flu pandemic when it first came about, then we saw this whole resurgence of people who had then taken their hobbies that had sort of sustained them through these times of trauma and turned them into careers. And I think we're seeing a real uptake in that idea now also.
Yeah.
So for the people who have begun writing or maybe have been working on acting or singing or things like that, do you have any advice for them on how to refine their art or kind of like get in now that things are opening up again?
Yeah. Well, it is challenging, I mean, because venues are opening, but their venues are also careful about, I mean, the bottom line for them, of course, is selling tickets. So there's a lot of things that are getting a lot of emphasis, which they always do. Music, musicals, those are sort of, they know people will come out for those kind of that kind of theater rather than straight plays. I think, gosh, the creative life is always a hard one. It's never easy. I mean, it's not easy to be an actor or a writer or a painter or anything in the arts is very, it's, you've committed to that life. There's, it's been my life since I've been 14 years old. So, I would, it's the same thing that you have to do without the pandemic. It's just, you do your work. I mean, if you're a writer, you write. If you're a painter, you paint. And, I write and I perform. So it's kind of, as things are opening, trying to get back to talking to venue producers and trying to sell my show and get my work on, again, there was a time when it was not possible, these last couple of years, things were completely closed. But now that that's, beginning to change, it's sort of back to what actors and artists do. You do your work and then you try to get it out to the public, and it's hard. It's always hard. And you kind of, I mean, it's such a cliche, but it really is true. If this is your calling, you do it. And you you take the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, which being in the arts is, and you just keep doing your work and keep trying to get it seen. And and now it's just harder to do that. It's so, because there's a lot of, I have done a lot of library performing, here in the States, probably in Canada too, libraries do a lot of public cultural presentations for the public. They offer that, and they have budgets to pay folks like myself to come in and do it. Well, they're not, libraries are open, but they're not doing any public performances like that, and they're not quite sure when, so hopefully it'll be, in the new year, it'll look better, in that regard for them. But so yeah, it's kind of the same thing. If you're in the arts and this is what you have to do, you just do it, and it's always hard. I mean, yeah. I guess that's my answer. I wish I don't know if that sounds kind of pessimistic, but it's just,
Sounds realistic.
yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that musicals are always a really big draw, and you did
Yeah.
do a bit of singing in
Yes.
your play.
Yes.
Would you ever do a musical?
Well, I haven't in recent years at all, but some time ago I did do a musical, and it's funny, I've done a lot. It's interesting, sort of my trajectory, my journey, if you will. I've as a young actress did a lot of film and television work, here in the States, and theater here. But soon I kind of got very, very compelled. I also, when I was younger, created a show on the dancer Isadora Duncan, the kind of the mother of modern dance. And I did that show for a number of years. And I found myself increasingly compelled, and then began to write seriously. I always kind of adapted material, but in my 30s, I began to take myself seriously as a writer and really put a lot into that. And so Hollywood, so to speak, became less and less interesting to me. So I found, although I'm grateful for the work I did there, found myself just kind of creating this own path for myself, of like creating these shows. I've had plays that have been done that I was not in, that have been done in New York and done here in on the West Coast. And it just sort of gone that direction. I don't know. I'm sorry. What was the question? Now I forgot what you asked me. Now, what am I talking about there suddenly?
Would you do a musical
Oh,
again?
thank you. Thank you. Would I do a musical? Well, it's so funny because I love to sing, and I don't really sing, but I did not do a lot of musicals. And because, as I said, I found myself kind of, it wasn't really planned, so to speak, but writing my own stuff and kind of pursuing that path. But I've always thought it'd be fun to add more songs into my Einstein show. I thought that would be fun, and I'd get a chance to sing, show off a little bit. So that's something I'm still thinking about, the show.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. It was wonderful. I really, really appreciate it. It was my pleasure.
Yes, so amazing to watch the show and then speak to you after about it, to just really get some insight and to hear about, the draw of Hollywood versus the draw of not Hollywood,
Yeah. Yes, Hollywood it's a tough place to be. It can be wonderful, but it's challenging. I do feel I've kind of created more agency for myself by sort of kind of, turning away from that world, from Hollywood, Tinseltown. a bit, but you know, it's great too. It's great. There's great things about it too. But you know, I'm kind of, I guess, on my own path in a way or something. I don't know.
The universe will just decide for you where you're
Yeah,
going to.
exactly, exactly. It's deciding. It is deciding. Well, thank
Okay,
you.
well,
Great. I really had a good time. Thank you so
I'm
much.
so did I. It's so lovely to speak to you. Once again,
Absolutely.
this has been Kres Mersky. She has a wonderful one-woman show that she has created called The Life and Times of Einstein. You can access it through our JCC website and enjoy. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Kres.
so much. It was a pleasure. Bye. Good night.
Good night.